Breaking down Operation Battleaxe, the SAS daring night mission. In the vast, unforgiving expanse of the North African desert, two massive armies were locked in a desperate struggle for control. This was a war of sweeping movements, of supply lines stretched to their breaking point, and of armored beasts dueling under a relentless sun. It was a war defined by titanic offensives, where thousands of men and hundreds of tanks were thrown into the crucible of battle. One of the most significant of these was Operation Battleaxe. But history isn't only written by grand strategies and generals' plans. It's also shaped in the shadows, by small groups of determined men who dare to do the impossible. This is a tale of two sides of that war. First, the story of a massive, conventional sledgehammer blow, a colossal armored charge designed to shatter the enemy line. And then, the story of what came next. It's the story of a scalpel, a secret mission born from the lessons of failure. It's the story of a brand new, untested unit and the daring night raid that would not only prove their worth but would help write a new chapter in the rules of modern warfare. In the blistering desert heat of June 1941, the massive British offensive known as Operation Battleaxe was grinding to a bloody halt. Hopes were high, poured into the steel hulls of nearly 200 tanks, but they were being systematically dismantled by Rommel's defenses. Yet, hidden within the chaos of this colossal failure was an idea, the genesis of a secret mission. This is the story of how the failure of a conventional army created the perfect environment for an unconventional legend to be born, and how a handful of men went behind enemy lines to do the impossible. So, why was Operation Battleaxe so critical? To get that, we have to rewind the clock a bit to mid-1941. The war in North Africa was a brutal seesaw. After early British successes against the Italians, a new player had arrived on the board, General Erwin Rommel and his Deutsches Afrika Korps. In a stunning blitzkrieg, Rommel had undone all the British gains, pushing them back across Libya right to the Egyptian border. One place, however, refused to fall, the deep-water port of Tobruk. Held by a stubborn garrison of mostly Australian troops, Tobruk was a thorn in Rommel's side. Its existence threatened his supply lines and stopped him from launching a full-scale invasion of Egypt to seize the ultimate prize, the Suez Canal. For the Allies, Tobruk wasn't just a besieged port, it was a symbol of defiance. Relieving it was a strategic necessity and a matter of extreme political urgency for Prime Minister Winston Churchill in London. Churchill, a man who believed one strong push could dislodge the Germans, was putting immense pressure on his Middle East Commander-in-Chief, General Sir Archibald Wavell. Wavell had already tried once. A smaller attack in May, Operation Brevity, had failed almost instantly. Now, Churchill demanded a larger, more decisive effort. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The key to this new offensive was a high-risk gamble known as the Tiger Convoy. In a daring run through the Axis-dominated Mediterranean, a convoy of fast merchant ships delivered a fresh injection of armor to the port of Alexandria, including 238 new tanks. Among them were the brand-new Crusader cruiser tanks, which the British hoped would finally give them an edge over the German panzers. With these new toys, Wavell had the tools Churchill demanded. The plan for a major offensive was set in motion. It was codenamed Operation Battleaxe. The objective was straightforward but incredibly ambitious: smash through the Axis lines, destroy Rommel's armored forces, and drive west to lift the siege of Tobruk. The force assembled for this task was the Western Desert Force, commanded by Lieutenant General Sir Noel Beresford Pearce. It comprised the 7th Armored Division, the famed Desert Rats, and the 4th Indian Infantry Division, totaling around 25,000 men and, most critically, nearly 200 tanks. British armored doctrine at the time was rigid and deeply flawed. It separated tanks into two distinct roles. Tanks, or infantry tanks like the Matilda, were slow but heavily armored, designed to move with infantry. Cruiser tanks, like the new Crusader, were fast and lightly armored, intended to fight other tanks like cavalry. This separation would prove disastrous. The British tanks were also hampered by their 2-pounder main gun. While a decent anti-tank weapon, it lacked a high-explosive shell, making it almost useless against enemy anti-tank gun positions. Facing them were Rommel's Afrika Korps and their Italian allies. While the British had more tanks, the Germans had a crucial qualitative advantage. Their true trump card was an artillery piece used in a way its designers never intended, the 88mm flak gun. Originally an anti-aircraft gun, its high velocity and devastating accuracy made it the most feared tank killer in the desert. Rommel, a master of improvisation, had integrated these 88s into his defensive screen. Anticipating an attack, he had established a series of fortified strongpoints from the coast inland, centered on key terrain like Halfaya Pass, Fort Capuzzo, and Hafid Ridge. The stage was set for a brutal showdown. The morning of June 15, 1941, broke hot and clear. As the sun climbed, the rumble of hundreds of tank engines filled the air. Operation Battleaxe had begun. The easternmost attack was aimed at Halfaya Pass, a winding coastal road so deadly it had earned the grim nickname, Hellfire Pass. It was defended by a small but determined group of German and Italian soldiers under a charismatic officer, Pastor Wilhelm Bock. Crucially, their positions were studded with well-hidden 88mm guns. The task of taking the pass fell to troops of the 4th Indian Division, supported by Matilda tanks. The Matildas rumbled forward, their crews confident in their thick armor. The German gunners held their fire, letting the tanks advance right into the kill zone. Then, they unleashed hell. The 88's high-velocity shells sliced through the Matilda's armor with terrifying ease. Tank after tank was brewed up, becoming a burning pyre on the slopes of the pass. The attack was a bloody and complete failure. In the center, things initially went better. Supported by armor, another part of the 4th Indian Division bypassed German defenses and drove for Fort Capuzzo. After fierce fighting, the old Italian fort was captured by midday. It was a tangible success, but it was an isolated victory in a rapidly deteriorating situation. The real disaster was unfolding to the west. This was supposed to be the decisive action. The 7th Armored Brigade, with its new Crusader tanks, advanced towards Hafid Ridge, expecting to engage Rommel's panzers. But Rommel had laid a trap. He positioned his tanks behind the ridge, out of sight, placing a screen of anti-tank guns, including more of the deadly 88s, on the forward slopes. The British cruisers, acting like a cavalry charge as their doctrine dictated, raced forward. As they crested the ridge, they ran straight into the teeth of the German gun line. The effect was catastrophic. The Crusaders were outranged and outgunned. Cyril Joly, a British tank commander, later recalled the terrifying experience of being hit. The shot had penetrated the front of the turret. It, or a jagged piece of the torn turret, had then hit the round that, the loader, had been holding ready. The explosion had wrecked the wireless, torn his head and shoulders from the rest of his body and started a fire. This horrific scene was repeated across the battlefield. By the end of the first day, the British had lost over half their tanks. Rommel's own tank losses were minimal. Day 2, June 16, the British tried to salvage the operation. Another attempt on Hellfire Pass failed just as bloodily as the first. The main focus became a confused armored battle in the center, as Rommel launched a counterattack. The British managed to hold him off, but the initiative had clearly passed to the Germans. The third day, June 17, brought the crisis to a head. At 4:30 in the morning, Rommel played his masterstroke. He ordered his panzer divisions on a wide, sweeping hook to the southeast, aiming to get behind the main British force and annihilate them. The remaining British tanks fought a desperate delaying action, but they were too weak to stop the German advance. As Rommel's panzers raced towards their rear, the threat of total encirclement became terrifyingly real. General Wavell, who had come forward to observe, realized the danger and authorized a full withdrawal. It was a desperate scramble back to the Egyptian border. Operation Battleaxe was over. It was an unmitigated disaster. The British failed to achieve any of their objectives, suffering 969 casualties and losing 91 tanks. By contrast, the Axis suffered fewer casualties and lost only about 12 to 15 tanks permanently. The failure had immediate consequences. General Wavell was promptly sacked and replaced by General Claude Auchinleck. Operation Battleaxe was a brutal lesson. The conventional sledgehammer had been shattered. And in the bitter aftermath, the seeds of a new kind of warfare would begin to sprout. While the wreckage of British tanks smoldered on the sands, a very different kind of soldier was languishing in a military prison in Cairo. He was a young, eccentric Scots Guards officer named David Stirling. Stirling had seen firsthand the waste of large-scale conventional operations and formulated a radical idea: small, highly trained teams, operating deep behind enemy lines, could inflict disproportionate damage on the enemy's most vulnerable assets, their aircraft and supply dumps. This wasn't an idea the traditional military hierarchy liked. But Stirling was persistent. In a now legendary move, he bluffed his way on crutches past the guards at Middle East HQ to present his idea directly to the top. Against all odds, the new commander-in-chief, General Auchinleck, perhaps chastened by the recent failure of conventional forces, approved the plan. And so, in July 1941, L Detachment, Special Air Service Brigade, was officially formed. The name was a piece of deliberate deception to fool Axis intelligence. In reality, the unit consisted of just 5 officers and 60 other ranks. One of Stirling's most crucial early recruits was a man who would become an SAS legend, Robert Blair "Paddy" Main. A former Irish international rugby player, Main was under arrest for knocking out his previous commanding officer when Stirling found him. Stirling recognized exactly the kind of fierce, audacious warrior his new unit needed and had him released. The SAS' first mission, Operation Squatter in November 1941, was a complete catastrophe. Launched in support of the next major offensive, the men were to parachute behind enemy lines to attack airfields. Hit by a ferocious desert storm, of the 55 men who jumped, only 22 made it back. The concept of the SAS was on thin ice, its future in serious doubt. But Stirling wasn't deterred. He knew his idea was sound, it was the delivery method that was flawed. He quickly pivoted, forging an alliance with another shadowy unit, the Long Range Desert Group, or LRDG. The LRDG were masters of desert navigation and would act as the SAS, Desert Taxi Service. For their second attempt, Stirling planned to attack 3 airfields simultaneously. He badly needed a success. The raid on Thammet Airfield, on the night of December 14, 1941, would be led by Paddy Main. This was the mission that would save the SAS. After a grueling journey with the LRDG, Main and his team of just 5 other men crept toward the airfield under the cover of darkness. What followed was a masterclass in silent sabotage. They moved from plane to plane, attaching their signature Lewis bomb explosives. Main's official report was a model of understatement, noting bombs were placed on 14 aircraft, with another 10 damaged by smashing their instrument panels. In a story that has become legend, Main, having run out of bombs, was said to have ripped the control panel out of an aircraft with his bare hands. After planting their charges, they made their rendezvous with the LRDG. Just before midnight, Thammet Airfield erupted behind them. The raid was a staggering success. Main's 6-man team had destroyed or damaged 24 enemy aircraft and wreaked havoc on the airfield, all without suffering a single casualty. On the same night, other SAS teams also had success, and in total, their second mission destroyed as many as 60 aircraft. The contrast with Operation Battleaxe, just 6 months earlier, couldn't have been more stark. In Battleaxe, 25,000 men and nearly 200 tanks had fought for 3 days, lost almost 100 tanks and nearly 1,000 men, and achieved nothing. At Thammet, 6 men with explosives had inflicted strategic-level damage and returned unscathed. This was the profound vindication of David Stirling's vision. The early SAS raids of late 1941 and 1942 changed the strategic calculus in the desert. Over their career in North Africa, estimates suggest the SAS destroyed as many as 400 enemy aircraft on the ground. It proved far more efficient to destroy planes on the ground at night than in costly dogfights. Paddy Mayne himself is credited with personally destroying over 100 aircraft on the ground, a tally higher than many of the war's top fighter aces. These raids forced Rommel to divert precious frontline troops to guard his rear areas. The Phantom Major, as the Germans nicknamed David Stirling, became a ghost that haunted the Axis high command. Later, in 1942, the SAS pioneered new tactics, famously turning armed jeeps into desert gunships for high-speed, hit-and-run raids that became their trademark. The legacy of Operation Battleaxe is one of learning from failure. It was a brutal education in the shortcomings of British armored doctrine and equipment. These lessons, paid for in blood and burned-out steel, would eventually lead to better tanks, improved tactics, and ultimate victory at El Alamein. The legacy of the early SAS, born in the wake of such conventional failures, is entirely different. It's one of innovation, audacity, and astonishing success. While the great armies grappled in the dust, L Detachment demonstrated a different way was possible. They proved that courage, ingenuity, and a willingness to break the rules could be as powerful as a battalion of tanks. David Stirling was eventually captured in 1943, and Paddy Mayne took over, leading the 1st SAS Regiment with distinction through the rest of the war. The story of Operation Battleaxe and the Tammet raid is more than a simple comparison of failure and success. It's the story of an evolution in warfare. It shows how the rigid thinking that led to the costly defeat of Battleaxe created the very conditions necessary for the birth of an unconventional force like the SAS. The failure of the sledgehammer created the opportunity for the scalpel. The handful of men who slipped through the darkness didn't just blow up airplanes, they blew a hole in the conventional wisdom of war, proving forevermore the truth of their motto, a motto that echoes to this day: who dares wins. If you enjoyed this piece of military history, be sure to subscribe and follow for more. We explore the untold stories and pivotal moments of warfare, from grand strategies to the most daring secret missions. And if there's a story you think we should cover, let us know in the comments below. The desert sands have long since buried the tank tracks and the raiders' footprints, but the lessons of that time remain. Operation Battleaxe is a powerful reminder of how bravery and new hardware can be squandered by flawed doctrine. But the daring raids of the fledgling SAS tell a different story. They are a testament to human ingenuity and the extraordinary impact that a small group of determined individuals can have against overwhelming odds. It was on these nighttime raids, deep behind enemy lines, that the legend of the Special Air Service was forged, a legend that would define special forces for generations to come.